Welcome to A Right to Know. I'm Sherry B. And today we have a truly amazing guest and show for you. Just to mention real quick at the top of the show here, we are going to be launching locals that you can subscribe to. So please keep an eye out and subscribe. You will have more intimate community with myself, and every once in a while we'll be having special guests and be able to ask your questions, get those answered, and get some more inside info on all the happenings. So keep an eye out for the local. Also, thank you for supporting our show via our sponsors, which are linked below in the show description. Makes a really huge difference for myself to be able to continue bringing you truth and quality shows. And without further ado, our guest today is a living legend. Proctor Gamble continues to forge a much needed positive impact globally. He's an extraordinary visionary leader, pioneer, and creator, along with his wife Kimberly, of the Thrive 1 and 2 films. Proctor is a direct descendant of the Proctor and Gamble family, although he decided to forge his path in helping save humanity, our planet, and continue to shed the spotlight on the darkness with concrete solutions for ringing in a beautiful new paradigm. Welcome to A Right to Know, Proctor Gamble.
Hi, Sherry. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome, Proctor. This is just amazing. I know all of our listeners are really looking forward to hearing from you today because you've been creating some really new things which we're going to talk about. But can we start off, Proctor? I want to let our audience who may have not heard some of these things about your background, about when you were younger. Now, I understand that you are from the Proctor and Gamble family. I believe that business started in something like 1837.
Yeah,
and
it's a long time.
A long time ago in Cincinnati, Ohio, which I believe that's where you're from originally.
Yes.
Okay, so your great-great-grandfather was James Gamble.
Yes.
So how is that? Did you break off from the sort of family empire? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, in the beginning, and for a long time, literally for 100 years, the company was one of the most respected companies in the world. Very successful financially, but also had a great reputation for training their employees well and operating ethically and so forth. And then things started to go downhill. Almost any company, when it gets to a certain size, things start to happen. Like in the late 90s, Dick Cheney went on the board of directors. And when I saw that, I thought, uh-oh, here we go. And sure enough, I actually have divested almost entirely from the company, because they basically do no organic products. Their environmental record has been very poor. The company is so big that even all of my clan of relatives have essentially no influence on the company financially. We don't own a large enough share. But because our name is Gamble, there have been a bunch of us who've been active over the years in just approaching the company at stockholders meetings and so forth and saying, we don't like what you're doing with certain environmental policies. We don't like what you're doing with unnecessary animal testing on cosmetics and so forth. And the company has listened. To their credit. I mean, they don't want to get bad publicity with a bunch of the Gambles going out there saying the company's gone over the cliff. So we've actually been quite successful at improving their environmental record, and also gotten rid of over 95% of the animal testing. So that's been basically my involvement with the company. The major blessing that I've had from my great-great-grandfather being an excellent entrepreneur was that I inherited some money. I'm like sixth generation, so it was not a lot, but it was enough that it affected my life. I knew that it wouldn't do any good going around complaining about my job, because I inherited enough money that if I managed it well, I could do what I wanted with my life, which is an incredible privilege to have. when I look back on my history, I've had just about every privilege you can imagine, from inheriting money to having absolutely outstanding, loving, wise parents, and great siblings. And as I went to all the finest schools, and I had a certain amount of intelligence and talent and great friends and so forth. So there was a point in my life when I realized it was really after I graduated from college. I actually created the filmmaking department as an undergraduate at Princeton because I wanted to make films. I knew how powerful they were. I wanted to make a difference in the world. So I got permission to create that department. And I told my friends that I was really going to make a film that would kind of fix the environment and improve the economies of the world and so forth. And I thought it would take 5, maybe 10 years conservatively to really analyze the problems and come up with the solutions and make the film. Well, 42 years later was when I finally felt ready and decided to make Thrive. And the whole purpose of Thrive was to expose what's really going on that is in the way of our thriving and what we can do about it. Kimberly and I didn't want to make a film that just talked about the skies falling without giving a way out. So we made the film. The film went viral from the very first day, went on to become the most widely seen feature documentary in history. And it was a real affirmation for us, a confirmation that not only are people ready to hear the truth, they're hungry for the truth, especially if it empowers them to do something about it. So that's pretty much been my path.
That's really amazing. And that you chose Foster. You're so grateful for what you have and what you've had. And you've used it in such a way to help humanity. That just warms all of our hearts so much. Thank you. You had an experience, if you can just touch on that. It's something I recently heard you speak on when you were 14 years old. Can you tell us about that, a vision that you had? I just want to take a second here. Please do support A Right to Know and Bringing Forth Truth and other fellow patriots by shopping on MyPillow. You can go to mypillow.com/Sherry, SHERRY, or you can go to mypillow.com and use promo code Sherry, SHERRY. It is not case sensitive, to get up to a 66% discount on certain items. Mike Lindell, a true patriot, you'll be supporting him at the same time. Grab something and treat yourself, treat your loved ones, and know that we always have brand new products coming up, new and exciting products on mypillow.com with promo code Sherry. Next up, if you are interested in trying to beat this inflation, this soaring inflation that we're all living these days, and would like to get direct pricing on gold and silver, amazing opportunity. You can click below and on our Silver Ripples direct gold and silver pricing info. There are other benefits that come along with it. You have access to gold-backed IRA. You can get exclusive collectibles and also access to the Sound Money Wallet, a place to keep your gold and silver outside of the bankster system so they can't freeze your accounts if they don't like your political views, or they don't like what you're saying, or they don't like that you're bringing forth truth to the masses. So email below for more information or tap on the link and you can have an appointment where we can tell you more about it. You had an experience, if you can just touch on that. It's something I recently heard you speak on when you were 14 years old. Can you tell us about that, a vision that you had?
Well, I think I was just talking about how wonderful my childhood was. And I would say the only major trauma of my early childhood was in 6th grade when we did our first nuclear attack drill, and the sirens went off and we were told to get under our desk and cover our heads. And I'm sitting there under the desk. I know it's a drill, but I'm thinking, wait a minute. If this is the best that the adults have to offer for a nuclear attack, I don't think they know what's going on or what to do about it. So I think in that moment, there was the fear went deep enough in me that I think it really started working on me very deeply. And then when I was 14, I ended up going off to a boarding school, very elite boarding school in Connecticut. And during the first few months, I was asleep at night. It was during the Bay of Pigs whole adventure with Cuba, the threat of nuclear war with the Russians and so forth. And so that furthered my fear. And all of a sudden, during the middle of the night, I hear this siren going off and I hear this deep rumble. And I thought, oh, shoot, this is it. So I jump up out of bed and I jump under my desk. and then there was no explosion. Then I finally stood up and I looked out the window and there was a snowplow going by with the lights on and a siren and the grinding of the plow against the road. But it was such a deep fear that I think something shifted to the next level. And within a few days of that experience, I was riding on a school bus going to a tennis match with a sports team. And I was looking out the window. I think the light was filtering through the trees, and it probably put me in somewhat of a trance. And all of a sudden, I had a full-blown vision of an atom with the nucleus, with the electrons going around the outside. And I thought, whoa, that's interesting. And then it transformed into a solar system. So the sun was at the center, and the planets were going around the outside. And it was like, oh, those are the same thing. And then it transformed again. It was a human body with the toroidal field, this donut-shaped electric field around the outside of the body. And the message that I got was, this is the answer to what you're looking for. Just figure out what this is. And so I came back, and I was on a fast track in math and physics. I was very gifted with sciences. So, and my teacher was also my tennis coach. He's the best teacher I ever had in school. And he was sitting in the front of the bus. So I come running up to him. I tell him about this vision. He was a brilliant physicist from Cambridge. And so to his credit, rather than saying, well, duh, that's the fundamental energy pattern of the universe, he said, that's really fascinating. Keep going with that and let me know what you come up with. So I did. I became completely obsessed. Remember with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when they were making these mountain out of mashed potatoes and so forth, I got permission they gave me a room in the physics department, and I went up there and I started building a contraption. And I had a huge flashlight, a big light beam generator. And I was taking blocks of glass and refracting the glass in these different angles. And finally, I was building this thing, taking up the entire room. And finally, it looped around. I bent the glass. I bent the light beam through the glass until it came all the way around and came back in on itself. And I finally accomplished that. I went and turned off the lights, and there was this glowing ring of light in the middle of the room. And I said to myself, okay, that's it. That's what I needed to do. So I invited all my friends and teachers and everything to come up and see it. And they said, well, Foster, it looks beautiful, but what is it? And I said, I really don't know, but I know this is the key to figuring out how humanity can relate to energy successfully. And that was my first introduction to the torus, because it turns out it is the fundamental energy pattern of the universe. And if we can recognize that and use it as a blueprint, not only for our own health and well-being, but for all of our systems, our communications, our education, our financial systems, our energy systems, if we do that successfully, we can actually have a thriving society on planet Earth.
Oh my gosh. And I know people, if they haven't seen Thrive 1 and 2, which I just watched again, where can they get access to those films? Because it's exactly what you're talking about now, the answer.
Well, I'm happy to report that both films and all of the Thrive archives from the last 15 years, over 200 blogs, and there are 2.5 years of my Freedom Portal shows. They're all now available for free at www.freetothrive.com.
Okay, and we'll have that linked in the show description below, the guest link. So scroll down there, freetothrive.com. In those films and what we're talking about right now, Foster, the toroidal, sort of like, it looks like a donut. Many people know the vision of it. It self-generates. It doesn't, I believe the energy continues around and it self generates. So when you talk about the different systems, because you do talk about in, I believe it's Thrive One, about the global domination agenda, which I want everyone to understand. If there are people just waking up to what's happening on this planet, I mean, there is a faction, whether you want to call them the cabal, the Illuminati, you know, the all-seeing eye at the top that you see on your dollar bill, that have been running the planet, but much to our demise, totally to our demise, and just for their control. So more and more people are waking up to this, and this is what, Foster, you also address in your film, and many others I've interviewed in the past who were actually in your film as well, like David Icke, etc. So you talk about they have a global domination agenda, and they are, you know, that is in the sector of energy, health, money, and information. And that, you know, what direction do we need to go into, Foster, so that we can take the power, maybe for the first time, really, into humanity's arms, into our hearts, into our lives, so that we're not these debt slaves any longer, and we're free to thrive?
Yeah. Well, I love that question, Sherry. That's really the one I think humanity should be asking itself every single day. And the answers are emerging. You know, when you go to the optometrist, and you put your chin on the thing, and then they start changing these lenses, and all of a sudden you can see really clearly when you get the right lenses. A lot of the purpose of Thrive One was to show people that there are two lenses that you can put on, which clarify the confusion tremendously. The first lens is the lens of the global domination agenda. If you are simply willing to entertain the possibility that there is a relatively small international group of psychopathic parasites who have co-opted all of the governance systems, from the kings to the priests to the dictators to the presidents, premiers, and prime ministers, for their own benefit, and ultimately to control not only their particular region of the world, but to band together and control the entire world. And it sounds like a lousy plot for a B-level James Bond movie or something like that. Unfortunately, in the last 30 years of my research, has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt for me that that's exactly what's going on. Once you realize that, then all of the crazy behavior with all the wonderful people and great technologies on the planet, how come we're on the verge of a global police state and destroying life on planet Earth? Well, it's because we've been duped. Almost nothing that we've been taught in school turns out to be true. Money is not what we thought it was. Energy is not what we thought it was. Government is not what we thought it was. So the purpose of Thrive One was to diagnose that problem and begin showing people how to move the lens of the global domination agenda in front of their eyes, and ask themselves, when they look at fiat money, when they look at government indoctrination education, when they look at filthy polluting energy systems in the control of the few, and on and on, when you look at those, does it make sense in terms of a global domination agenda? And we laid out, I've done it in every sector, all 13 sectors, but we laid out about 5 or 6 of them in Thrive One, to show that if you follow the money in every sector, it always leads to the same people, the same international banking cabal, and the same secret societies. And that's how they organize to do these things. So that's the lens number one. And that's the bad news lens, is the GDA, we call it. The good news lens is the torus. If you're willing to look at life, at the universe, through the lens of this toroidal vortex, then you see that it is the blueprint of a sustainable system at every scale, from subatomic, from the very smallest, what they call the Planck scale level, all the way up through the human body, the planet Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, the clusters, and the universe itself are all, now physicists and cosmologists will tell you, it's all toroidal at every level, because that's the only system which, as you mentioned, self-sustains in a homogeneous medium. It's like a whirlpool in a stream in the mountains or something like that. The water is just flowing along, but when it creates a whirlpool, the whirlpool is a distinct entity. You can say, oh, look, there's the whirlpool, but it's also a part of the flow of water in the entire stream. And that's the key to every atom, every of the periodic table, every single system that we're a part of. If it's healthy and sustaining, it is a toroidal vortex.
So, Foster, there are many people who are going to be listening to this broadcast. And I know people that I talk to out there in the world, and I'm sure it's the same for you. There are people who have the fear embedded in them as a psychological operation on purpose over the years, through the educational system, through the mainstream media, certainly. And it's on a level that's not just sound bites, but there's also different frequencies and things that they put behind, music, in visuals that we see in the mainstream, et cetera, that are, if you want to call them hypnotic, whatever, but that do a little bit of brainwashing and do embed fear. There are people, because of that, people don't realize that they need to, number one, unplug from the mainstream media. But there are people that have lost confidence in humanity. They think, oh no, socialism is a good thing. We have to pay our taxes to fix the roads. We have to stop and think critically. Who has planted those thoughts in our minds? And why are we in such fear that we don't have confidence in humanity? How dare us think that we could run ourselves? How dare us think that we could live in a thriving environment, on all these levels of institutions, banking, energy, health, etc. And we're all, it's like breaking out of the matrix. Okay. That's what you and Kimberly have so keenly helped everyone through your films and through your work, is to see outside of this matrix that we are entrapped in. And what do you have to say, Foster, to those people who are in fear that, of course, humanity can't handle? We need to be policed. We need to be totally and utterly controlled.
Well, as Kimberly and I set about trying to share the fruits of our research with the world, we found relatively quickly that there's kind of three categories of folks out there. There are people who know, who actually have a fundamental understanding of what's really going on. And then there are people who don't know, but they actually want to know. They just haven't been sufficiently informed yet. And that's where we realize, okay, that's our market. It's not worth spending a lot of our time trying to persuade people in the third group, which is people who don't know and they don't want to know. They know that they don't want to know. And why in the world would you not want to understand the truth of reality? Well, it's because you're too afraid. And you sense that if you learn more, you're going to be even more afraid. And this is the dilemma that is so, we live in such interesting times. It's never been more dangerous for all of humanity. And there's never been a time when individuals can make a bigger difference through internet technologies and so forth. So we're really coming to a transformation point here. And one of the things that I say to people is, have compassion for someone that you're trying to wake up who doesn't want to wake up, because the fact is that initially you're not bringing them good news. If they think, okay, well, there's this drastic global pandemic, but the governments and the health agencies and so forth and the doctors, they're all working on it as hard as they can. And now maybe they fixed it and so forth. Well, that's not all that bad a news scenario. But if you come in telling them, no, this is just one of their tools to try to set up all of the structures to depopulate and to take over everyone's lives, that's not good news. So that's just simply validating for a lot of people who are afraid. Okay, see, I didn't want to know this. And I, to their credit, several of my friends and relatives have said to me, Foster, I know you're not crazy and I know you're not stupid. You've done your homework. But if what you're saying is true, it would be so devastating for me that I don't want to know. So don't talk to me about this. And I thank them. I say, well, at least you know yourself well enough to know that you're not ready for the truth. If that changes, come to me. Meanwhile, I'm going to go talk to people who actually are ready. Now, one thing that was very interesting, because you and I met at the Conscious Life Expo, and it was a fascinating experience for me, because when I was first there back in, I think, 2014, Kimberly and I kind of were the rabbit hole. And there was at least one, famous speaker who withdrew from the conference because they didn't want to speak at the same conference as conspiracy nuts. And so this time, here we are, this many years later, there was an entire theme called Down the Rabbit Hole. And it was like sold out and standing room only, just great speakers from all over the world. And I said to the audience in a big panel that I was on, that I really felt like I was graduating, because when Kimberly and I set out on our mission 20 years ago, one of our missions was to help merge the consciousness movement with the truth movement, because they're both so huge and so important and powerful, but they were really, like, to a great degree, different movements. And to help merge those, not through compromise or giving in or selling out, but to meet at a higher level where consciousness folks are willing to confront the truth of the uncomfortable truths, and the truth movement, conspiracy folks and so forth, were willing to include the necessity of spiritual awareness as a place to operate from in their activism. And I was stunned at the Conscious Life Expo, and I think there was 14,000 people there or something like that. My estimate was that probably 80% of those people were now awake to fundamentally to the nefarious agenda that's really going on in the world. So to me, and I told Kimberly when I got back, I said, our dream has come true. It's got its own momentum now. We helped get that done. And so we were a little bit shocked when the film first came out. We thought our largest audience was going to be amongst conspiracy groups. And it was actually in the consciousness movement. 70% of our demographic, as this film went viral, was in the consciousness movement. And so we started asking our friends, why do you think this is? And what we realized is that in the consciousness movement, there's a lot of people who have done therapy, they've done plant medicine, they've done meditation. And so they have oftentimes expanded their sense of who they are and their own personal, mental, and emotional and interpersonal skills to a degree to where they were ready to handle the difficult information and then actually begin to act on it. So that was a huge kind of a wake-up call for us to realize that the consciousness movement has been preparing for the truth at the same time that the truth movement has, to a great extent, been kind of calling out for spiritual help. So it's finally happening. And that's one of the reasons why Kimberly and I have ended up closing down. We had 4 corporations around the Thrive movement. And there's a huge overhead, and it was just a tremendous amount of work. We were on a treadmill for 20 years. And we realized that we were, part of a handful of folks like David Icke that you mentioned, and Alex Jones and James Corbett and others, when we first became aware of the global domination agenda and so forth. And now there are literally millions of podcasters doing great research, doing amazing truth telling. And we don't really need to do that anymore. That's being done. So Kimberly has essentially retired after having not had a break since she was 19. And so she's really focusing more on her spiritual life and her family life and so forth. And I have simplified what I'm doing down to a single website, a team of about 3 people assisting me. And I'm really focused on, okay, what's the best use of me? Because I'm 75 years old. I'm fortunately enjoying great health and still have a lot of energy. But at this age, you never know. So I'm looking to optimize my time and my life. And the main thing that I feel like I can offer is clarity around what's called voluntarism. I believe that humanity has been missing throughout our history a universal morality, a fundamental moral compass. And I believe that the non-aggression principle, which states that no one is allowed to initiate force or fraud against anyone else except in true self-defense. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but at the same time, most people, even if they say, well, yeah, that makes sense, that's kind of like the golden rule, but then they turn right around and go vote for their next ruler. And government itself is, by definition, a violation of the non-aggression principle, because it only survives on taking other people's money against their will, calling it taxation. So it's no coincidence that every government in history has been corrupt, because the notion of a few people claiming the right to rule other people is in itself a violation of the fundamental universal morality. So I've spent the last 15 years really researching this, because I was introduced to it by my son, who blew my mind. I realized that I was on moral quicksand and he was coherent. And so I've been studying this. It's the punchline of both of my films and all of my shows. But still, it's such a challenge for people in general to relate to. I mean, the natural application of the non-aggression principle universally means you then have a stateless society. You have rules based on the non-aggression principle, but you don't have any rulers. And that is such a mind exploder for most people, because we've been so conditioned, that I'm really dedicated the rest of my life to helping people by creating as much media, and I'm writing a book, basically a user's manual for how to get from here to there, and how a stateless society not only could work. I've come to the conclusion after a lifetime of research that it's the only way that humanity is actually going to survive, much less thrive. So that's what I'm dedicating my life to, and it feels really great to just kind of narrow my focus to what I think is most important. And anybody going to that website, freetothrive.com, you got years worth of resources, all reinforcing that awareness.
And you have fireside chats. I know you have one coming up, so people can check that out, because whenever they're listening to the show, they'll see when the next one is.
Yeah, let me mention a little something about that, because, I used to do shows all the time, and now I'm just doing probably just a monthly show for a couple of reasons. One, because I have a large community on the internet, and people were really sad to think of that community going away, because we had been meeting for a lot of people, particularly in the hinterlands all over the world. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the community where I can be myself and say anything and be accepted, and really explore how to be effective in transformation. So I'm continuing that. I'm now calling it Fireside Live. And yeah, my first one is coming up this Saturday. And that's for paid subscribers, but you can also, if you just want to check the whole thing out, you can do a month trial for free and just join the conversation, check out the website and see if it's something you want to be a part of. Membership is $15 a month. So I think you'll see that for what you get, it's a small amount to pay, and you will be amazed, particularly those who are kind of waking up for the first time and feeling lonely. Maybe you feel like you've lost friends and family members and so forth. You'll instantly be part of a huge global community that understands your thinking and appreciates your courage.
And that's amazing. And it's a growing, I was going to say glowing, that too, but it's a growing community, and we all have to unite, because we've all really been through the ringer the last couple of years. I don't know of many exceptions at all with, our families, certain, people getting jabs even for the first time, and just falling for the whole COVID narrative, which is just really another level of policing everyone, just another level of putting in fear and taking away your rights. So what I can see through your Thrive films, Foster, and your work is that things can be so less complicated than we've been made to believe. All these three-lettered agencies. One of the things that you talk about is let me go over some of the things that you talk about as solutions, and we can sort of break down But you say stop any more bailouts of banks and corporations. Number one. Number two, dismantle the Federal Reserve. Number three, withdraw taxpayer support from central agencies like the IMF and World Bank. Number four, allow development of alternative currencies and independent banks. And five, refuse international taxes. So let me just, the one where you mention the three-lettered agencies, just like the World Economic Forum. I mean, all these agencies, we are paying. We are paying for our own demise, and they are using us as debt slaves and taking our taxpayer money, and it just doesn't stop. It's just never enough. And funding these terrible corporations. And you even mention in one of your films that, for example, the United Nations was created by the Rothschild, or was it the Rockefellers?
The Rockefellers. The League of Nations was created by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. That didn't really work out, so they did it. That was after World War I. After World War II, they tried again, because the whole thing is a front for a one world government. And the Rockefellers funded most of it and gave the property on Manhattan for the building.
Just like the Federal Reserve, it's not government. And it has no reserves. And I've interviewed and actually been in person visiting with G. Edward Griffin. I've had him on the show a couple times in the past, bless his heart, who wrote The Creature of Jekyll, from Jekyll Island. And that was totally by trickery pulled through. Yes. The first year it wouldn't come through, so they started advertising that they were coming from a different political party because it wasn't working. Total smoke and mirrors. And they snuck off to Jekyll Island and pulled it through. Anyway, all this stuff needs to just collapse. It needs to go away. It's such a waste of our time and energy, and we want to thrive. We want to use our creativity. We can unite as humanity. Human beings, if they have enough water and a roof over their head and they don't have to stress out, everyone gets along just great. It takes away all the stress, which is what they've created. So,
well, that's one of the beautiful things that's going on right now, is that because of all this fraud, from the money to the education to the health care and all that, it's gotten so bad in their attempt to depopulate and take over control that when you push against the unified field pushes back. It wants equilibrium. It wants to nurture the life force to thrive. So this whole COVID scam has been really brutal for literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, and it's not over yet. But because it was so outrageous and so dangerous and so fake, now hundreds of millions of people are waking up and going, wait a minute, if that whole thing wasn't real, then what about money? And what about education and so forth? So there's the biggest great awakening going on planet Earth right now that there's ever been in history. And it's not happening through the mainstream media, obviously, because they've been co-opted and bribed and blackmailed, and they're simply propaganda arms. But you can see through people like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson that the mainstream media is dying on the vine. The viewership during primetime evening on CNN is about 350,000, whereas Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan are like 10, 20, 50 million per episode on these things. So it's and even, most of us used to be on the left. Because the left was where the free speech and anti-war, the compassion seemed to be. Yes. But then the left got taken over.
Hijacked. It
got hijacked by the deep state, by the Chinese Communist Party. But now you look and look at the prominent lefties who are waking up. People like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald. I mentioned Russell Brand, Dave Rubin, Bobby Kennedy Jr., and Naomi Wolf. What's that?
I said Sherry Beale.
Sherry Beale.
Over the left.
Proctor Gamble, and Mickey Willis, and Elon Musk, and Tulsi Gabbard, and the list goes on. And fortunately for most of them, they're not just waking up and then swinging over to the right or something like that. They're actually looking to the guidelines for the future are not gender, race, politics, age, all that kind of stuff, or political parties. It's truth and it's freedom. And that's what's going on in the world right now, is we're waking up to that.
Exactly. Amen to that. And for anyone here who, I don't care whatever side you lean, okay? Because I'm a registered independent, but I used to do, a show on FM radio for almost 10 years on a very far leaning left radio station in Los Angeles. However, I mean, it's powered by the people, and we had free speech because we didn't have any advertisers. We had no sponsors. It was fantastic. I was talking 20 years ago, my first show on fluoride, talking about chemtrails, talking about the jabs,
Right.
the V word, et cetera. And of course, now I got knocked off YouTube. Back then, you could talk about it even 15 years ago. Now you can't talk about it. So it used to be the left that said, my body, my choice. Yeah. I want my medical, my religious, and my personal exemptions to not taking a jab. I'm just using that word jab. And then all of a sudden they took the left over the cliff. So, we're all here together. It's about truth and freedom. And one thing I want to mention real quick, Foster, is in the educational system here in the schools. I've taught in all the schools from kindergarten to seniors. And these kids don't even know who Tesla is.
They think it's a car. Yeah.
They think it's a car. I ask them in a certain way and they just totally think it's a car. Okay, that just goes to show you people, why do they not teach about Nikola Tesla in school and others? Because they don't want us to know about free energy. And let's go into that really quick, because that is certainly our freedom right there. Right. If we don't have to depend on what they've created, and not only is it our freedom, but it's our fresh air, it's our clean water, it's our clean food. And Foster, you've traveled around the world, you and Kimberly, you document that in your films Thrive. You have met with people, and I've met with people. I just came from Dr. Greer's historic disclosure conference in Washington, D.C. And there have been many people out there, and you list them in your film, and I so appreciate that, who have created free energy, because there's not just one way to create free energy. There's many different ways. These people have been, well, not only demoralized, they've been in prison, they've been killed, etc. Where do you feel that we are, Foster? Because I know you went all the way to Zimbabwe, for example, and met with this lovely gentleman. Where are we? It seems like it's going to be coming out soon. The shift.
Well, that's my sense of it. There are numerous working technologies. I'm happy to report after 20 years of research. And we talked earlier about the torus being the fundamental pattern of sustainability. Every single working new energy technology that I have ever seen and vetted is in one way or another mimicking the toroidal energy pattern, because that's what energy is doing throughout the entire universe. So if you mimic it accurately, if you get the right geometry, the right materials, you have it rotate at the right frequency or vibrate at the right frequency, however it is you're accessing resonance with the field, then literally it's like tuning your guitar to the band of the cosmos or something like that. And when you get it right, it just starts pouring out all the energy that you need. Now, as you say, and that's one of our major kind of battlefields of liberation. But those psychopaths and parasites who want to control everything, that's the last thing they want. They want to control us through food, through money, through education, through media, and through energy. They want to dole out energy based on your compliance with the global domination agenda. And that's why they have suppressed and they have confiscated. The official number is 6,000, but David Martin, who's the living expert on confiscated patents, says it's over 11,000 new energy patents have been confiscated. That's just in the US alone. And so a lot of people say, well, if it really worked, it would be out there. Well, no, not necessarily. I've spent a lot of my life tracking down new energy inventors and people who are curing cancer at 80 to 90% rates, and most of them are in hiding because there have been assassination attempts by the very controllers behind the global domination agenda. So yeah, there are magnetic devices, there are electronic devices, there are rotational devices, and basically what they're all doing is dancing with the universe in such a way that it pours out free energy. And they would not be suppressing. I mean, I think I had 30 inventors or something like that in that clip that I did in Thrive 2, showing all the ones who had been either gagged or disappeared or just outright assassinated. And they wouldn't need to do that if the devices didn't work. In Thrive 1, we made a lot of predictions. We predicted total surveillance and directed energy weapons and banking schemes and the attempts to collapse the U.S. And the takeover of education by socialism and communism and so forth. We also predicted not only free energy, but also that UFOs were real and that we've been visited for a long time by all sorts of creatures from all over the cosmos. And now even the government is having to come out and admit it. That, just like a week ago, the most credible whistleblower ever is coming out talking about the crash craft that they have retrieved from non-human sources. And now another one's come out talking about the underground antenna stuff, the UFO detection devices in Antarctica. I mean, we are at the time where all of this is starting to happen. My motto these days is truth floats and love wins. And then those two go together. Truth floats because truth is simply the nature of reality. Truth is the entire unified field of what's so in every moment. And to fight against that, it's possible. We have free will. So people can create fake money and they can assassinate people. And obviously, this has been happening for a long time, but only for so long. And then the universe pushes back and the truth begins to come out, no matter how much money or time or force they've employed to try to suppress it. And now the truth is coming out in every single of the 13 sectors that we work with in our solutions hub. So for every parasitical agenda that the GDA has been imposing, now there are whole system solutions that are emerging in the public view in every single sector. And the key to our surviving and thriving, in my opinion, is that to advertise and educate that to the world, and then for everyone to discover as best they can. And we do a lot of media on this, how to collaborate successfully without anybody dominating anyone else, but simply collaborate synergistically. Because when this whole exoskeleton of the global domination agenda collapses, and it not only will, but it has to, by definition, it has to. It's not a sustainable system, just like fake money or a fake credit card is not going to last. So it's going to collapse. It's already begun. The collapse has begun. So the key is, for the first time in history, not to have the civilization panic and just go on a bended knee to the next tyrannical authority, but to say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. We've got all these whole system solutions. We've got alternative true currency. We've got homeschooling. We've got charter schools. We've got all sorts of free choice schools. We've got honest truth media that's coming out. And I could go through all of the 13 sectors and have copiously in my blogs to show that as this nefarious system collapses, we've already got all the systems that we need. As long as we can coordinate them and wake up enough people, we can actually simply go to a smaller and smaller government, and ultimately to a stateless society based on the non-aggression principle and living in harmony with the toroidal nature of energy in the universe.
Amen. Amen to that, Foster. And they should have the guide that you're working on in the education system. They should completely shift it. And you're right, it is collapsing. And just like the fiat dollar, just like any system, it's got to collapse. And when you said truth, I flashed on. I actually interviewed Dr. Emoto. He came into the radio station. So he came in, years ago when he was still living. God bless
I've been
him.
working with his son
Yeah,
in
his son
Japan.
was
I've
there
done
too.
a couple of conferences with him. I didn't know his father, but the work is just beautiful.
Yes, Dr. Emoto came into the radio station, and his son was with him translating.
Oh, great.
And so when you see the crystal that of truth, just like love, when you
Right.
love to the water and you see it under the microscope, truth is as beautiful as the crystal of love. So
Yes.
that can even tell us scientifically, concretely, in that way, that we're bringing truth out. And as you mentioned, the mainstream is dying. Legacy media, there are less people. They're just like maybe some older people that just know how to run the TV. And I know some of those people, like my mom, bless her heart, she doesn't go on the internet and get her information, which everybody else is doing now. So that is going to collapse. It's already collapsing, and like the Phoenix Rising, we're going to come up. But we need, in the meantime, to unite, to gather with our communities, and to do our research. Proctor Gamble, you are indeed a living legend. And I know myself and my listeners, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all that you've endured, for all that you have sacrificed, to both you and Kimberly, all that you have created and that you continue to create. So we're not going to let you down. We got your back. And I'm going to let you, if you want to say anything to our listeners in closing.
Well, Sherry, thanks for that acknowledgement. It means a lot, especially coming from you. You're one of my heroes. You've been onto this for a long time, and so courageously, despite whatever anybody has thrown at you, you just keep holding to that beacon of truth. I guess in thinking what, a final message for this particular conversation would be, every single one of us, practically on a daily basis, is dealing with how far to go and what to say in our conversations with the people in our lives. And I just want to encourage you to use your discernment about timing, because these conversations are what I call dominant, not domineering, but they're dominant conversations. If you start talking about the Federal Reserve and the depopulation agenda and so forth, it's so compelling because people's soul can understand how important it is that people start to gather around, and it can rapidly ruin a birthday party or a wedding reception or something like that. I've learned this the hard way, I promise you. And so I want to pass on, use your discernment about timing and about being gentle and compassionate with your, mostly leading with questions, so that you really put yourself on the same team as whoever you're wanting to share information with. So it's the two of you discovering together. And ultimately, if you feel the time is right, go ahead and don't hold back. Step out with the truth that even if your voice trembles as you start to do it.
Thank you, Proctor Gamble. Words of wisdom that we will be listening to over and over again, but so compelling and so true. So thank you for joining us on A Right to Know, and we're going to certainly have you back soon and see how your new venture's going. I'm all excited about that. I'm going to be tuning in for sure. And anyway, from the bottom of our hearts, Proctor and Kimberly Gamble, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. It's an honor. Bye-bye.
So make sure to keep it tuned, because you have a right to know.